In this video, I will talk about Apple Intelligence coming to the EU as what is known in 2024. Specifically, I will address the question, what is the DMA? You may have heard that the DMA is the problem behind why Apple Intelligence just doesn't come to the EU just as it does in the US, for example. Let's have a look. So what is the problem specifically? The problem is that phone mirroring, SharePlay Screen Sharing enhancements and Apple Intelligence, which is what we're interested in, will not be rolled out to EU users in 2024 because of regulatory uncertainties due to the EU's Digital Markets Act, the DMA. Apple specifically said, "We're concerned that the interoperability requirements of the DMA could force us to compromise the integrity of our products in ways that risk user privacy and data security." Now keep watching until the end of the video for some workarounds which are known and work for some users how to use Apple Intelligence in the EU after all. But for now, let's have a look what the DMA actually is, to give you some background. DMA is the Digital Markets Act. It is a EU regulation which became applicable on the 2nd of May 2023, and it targets the largest digital platforms, gatekeepers, with their so-called gatekeeping products. These are the companies which are gatekeepers: Alphabet, which you might not have heard of, but they do Google and Chrome, Amazon, Apple, of course, ByteDance, Meta, which is Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, and Microsoft. And for Apple specifically, the following gatekeeping products were identified: the App Store, Safari, iOS, and later on in April 2024, iPadOS. Please keep in mind that the Mac was not identified as a gatekeeper device. This is important. Why is the EU regulating this? So, for example, in the EU, 95% of search is dominated by Google. On the mobile OS market, the situation is not as strong as this. For Apple, for example, has iOS 27% and Android, Alphabet's Android, or Google's Android, if you wish, 72%. So the reason why they're trying to regulate is really, if you want to get to consumers, and companies are found through search, you have to go through Google, for example. So Google basically can charge whatever it wants, and companies are forced to pay up. And because it is such a strong domination, even if other companies, let's say DuckDuckGo or whatever, or Bing, offer much cheaper rates, still most companies will be forced to pay up for going through Google, because that's where the users are. Same if you want to sell your app to iPhone users, you need to pay Apple 30%. And even for in-app purchases, they take some cut. So the DMA, the new EU regulation, Digital Markets Act, is to allow small and new players to enter the market. For example, some of the requirements it has is to allow the installation use of third-party software applications and, even more important, software application stores. In this case, a software application store, a third-party software application store, could just drop the share or cut it takes from vendors to something like 10% or 5%. Even if Apple then does take a cut of its own, let's say 10% or whatever, this store still would be able to be more competitive. So you could purchase applications at a cheaper rate from a third-party store, still install them on your iPhone, and it would be the same application. Now keep in mind that, of course, this is a kind of race to the bottom. So the third-party software application stores are, of course, incentivized to cut costs, to cut corners, which Apple doesn't have to. Apple can look at quality, and they can actually check apps which are applying thoroughly and so on. Now, with allowing third-party software application stores, they lose control over the ultimate chain, over what kind of software gets installed on the iPhones. And on the Macs, of course, as well. But on the Macs, you always had the capability to just install apps and download them directly. Another requirement is to apply fair and non-discriminatory general conditions of access for business users to its software application store. Seeing this in that light, Apple's comment is it does make sense, right? Specifically, we're concerned that the interoperability requirements of the DMA could force us to compromise the integrity of our products in ways that risk user privacy and data security. Basically, if third-party application software stores are allowed, which would have maybe different selection criteria than Apple can just tell any company that they won't allow their app onto the App Store. Now, if third-party apps could access it, security could be basically compromised. Of course, there's a different aspect to this as well, which is being able to dominate this new technology, to understand how to control it, and again, Apple is a for-profit company, how to make money off of the Apple intelligence. After all, it's Apple intelligence. It's not third-party intelligence which they're offering. So they have to understand how it works, what they can do within the scope of DMA, etc. And for now, they've chosen to not roll it out to EU users in 2024. But there are some interesting differences between Mac and iOS. If you look at the release notes, and here's the source, 9to5mac.com, where I got this from, iOS 18.1 specifically says Apple Intelligence is not currently available in the EU or China, whereas the macOS Secure 15.1 release notes just say Apple Intelligence is not currently available in China. The word EU is specifically only mentioned with iOS. Again, keep in mind what I said at the beginning of this video. This might be related to Apple simply having to comply with the DMA on the gatekeeping product, the iOS or the App Store. But macOS has a very tiny market share compared to Windows desktop computers. That is why the EU does not appear there. And the other important word here is currently. That's why I've highlighted it in bold as well. So Apple is working on bringing Apple Intelligence to the EU as well. That's what Tim Cook said in his earnings call on August the 1st. Their objective is to move as fast as they can and to get features out for everyone. And they're very constructively engaged with both regulators, meaning China and the EU. So here you have it, how to use Apple Intelligence in the EU on macOS. I'll do iOS next, but for macOS it's a little bit easier and probably more reliable to get it. The way you do it is you set the language to English US, set Siri to English US, and set the region to the United States. Then in the system settings you'll see this Apple Intelligence and Siri, and there you will have a capability of joining the waitlist. Some users need a restart. For some, apparently it does not work. Here's a link, which I'll also post in the comments, for a Reddit thread where you can get further info and maybe also post your experience. Also, by the way, do share your experience, whether you were able to get this working on your Mac or your iPhone, iPad, in the comments of this video. If you're a user in the EU or in a country close to the EU, let's say Norway or the UK, on this same Reddit thread, a user commented that the iCloud or App Store account doesn't matter. So this seems pretty straightforward. Let's have a look at the iOS. With iOS, the situation is a bit more difficult. So on iOS 18.1 Beta 2, you have to set the language to English US, set Siri to English US, and set region to the United States. That's everything the same as with macOS, but here you also have to sign into the App Store with a US account. And then you can join the waitlist for Apple Intelligence in the settings, again Apple Intelligence and Siri. It's currently unclear whether Apple will continue to allow this, and well, as they say, your mileage may vary. A user reported, for example, that they went on a ferry from Spain to Morocco. They were able to activate Apple Intelligence there, and once they returned into the EU, Apple Intelligence was still usable and is usable up to this day. Again, check out the Reddit thread, or also comment below about your experience with iOS 18.1 Beta 2, with Apple Intelligence, and of course macOS. Thank you for watching, and if you would like more tips about generally intelligence, Apple Intelligence, artificial intelligence for business users specifically, subscribe to my channel.